Hey everyone, we're going to be exploring the question today, how do I know if I'm doing it right when I'm meditating? This is a question that comes up a lot for me when I'm teaching my classes, and it's a very big question because there's a lot of different ways that you can answer this question, but I'm going to do my best to answer it in a bunch of different ways to hopefully give you all some pointers or some direction with your own practice. I think the first thing to consider when you're asking the question, how do I know if I'm doing it right in my meditation practice, is to consider what is it that you want out of your meditation practice? What is your intention for the practice? So whether or not you're doing the practice right will depend on what it is you're hoping for in your practice, or what your practice means to you. For example, if what is most important to you is to have some more peace in your life, it may be that driving down to the beach or some body of water or some other place of peace for you and spending some time there every day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, where you're just, let's say it's the beach, if you're just watching the waves crash on the beach, for you to bring awareness, bring attention to the waves crashing on the beach for that period of time, it is a form of meditation in that you're bringing awareness to this occurrence over and over, and you might feel the wind on your skin, or you might feel the sun if the sun is out at that time. So if what you want out of your meditation practice is more peace in your life, and going to the beach like this and sitting for 30 minutes and feeling the wind and watching the waves gives you more peace, then you're doing it right. If your intention is to have more peace and reading gives you more peace, I wouldn't call reading particularly a meditation practice, but if what you want is more peace in your life and reading gives you more peace, then you're doing it right. The other thing you might want out of your meditative practice is focus. You might be having difficulty focusing in your life. So what I've found to be true for me is what helps with my focus is a concentration practice of bringing focus or concentration to something specific. So I'll use the example of the breath, and you use it as a practice. So you would sit down and bring awareness to the breathing process, either where you'd feel it in the body or just the felt sense in the body of breathing itself, or recognizing it at the belly or the air coming in and out of the nostrils, and coming back to that over and over and over and over. Every time your mind wanders, coming back is sort of a practice in concentration, and has helped me in my life be more focused at times and less distractible. So it's another thing you might want to consider. If what you want out of your practice is to be more focused, and if sitting down for 30 minutes a day, focusing on the breath, is making you feel more focused and less distractible in your life, then again, you're doing it right. So it's very important to consider what it is you want out of the practice. Another thing that a lot of people who come to my classes are looking for is to reduce stress, or reduce levels of anxiety. So what I know about reducing stress is from mindfulness-based stress reduction. I'm a qualified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, and there's a lot of neuroscience backing. There's a lot of research that supports the opinion that MBSR reduces stress. And there's research studies that show that the 8-week course in MBSR will reduce the release of the stress hormone cortisol in the body over time. So there's some science backing the fact that if you want to reduce stress, then there's a specific type of meditation known as mindfulness-based stress reduction that is shown in some research studies to be doing that. So if your intention is to reduce stress, I might suggest looking more into mindfulness-based stress reduction or just mindfulness practices in general. Maybe even just going online or going to the other podcasts that I have here and doing some mindfulness practices and seeing if those practices are helping reduce stress in your life if you do them over time. So again, if your intention is to, or your hope is to reduce stress, if you find that the meditation practice is reducing your stress, then again, you're doing it right. So I'm going to revisit the question here. How do I know if I'm doing it right? How do I know if I'm doing the meditative practice right? Another way you can look at this is there's a lot of different types of meditation practices. I can't speak on them all in depth. I have introductory knowledge to some of them, such as Zen and Vipassana and practices of self-inquiry. These are all different meditation practices, and if you'd want to learn more about each of these practices, I would recommend, maybe picking up a book or looking online, in particular for the Zen practice or Vipassana practice or self-inquiry. To learn about the practice of self-inquiry, if you're interested, I would recommend looking up a teacher named Rupert Spira, Rupertspira. He's been very helpful in helping me learn about this practice of self-inquiry. Also, Adyashanti, Adyashanti. When it comes to Zen practice, I'm not very familiar with specific teachers, so I can't really speak on that. When it comes to Vipassana practice, there is a teacher known as Goenka, Goenka, and the Goenka organization holds Vipassana retreats all over America, and I'm not sure if it's outside of America, but you can look into that as well. But the one that I can speak about specifically is mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is the practice that I'm qualified to be teaching and that I practice mostly in my life. I also practice some of these other forms. Most regularly, I also practice self-inquiry, but the main practice in my life at this point is mindfulness-based stress reduction type practice. So if we could speak about this in particular, how do I know if I'm doing this right? Within this question, there's also multiple ways that you can answer it, but one of the ways that I'll approach it is from a technique standpoint. So what I mean is, let's say something as far as posture, right? How do I know from a technique standpoint if my posture is correct? My understanding is that from the standpoint of mindfulness-based stress reduction, there is certain different types of meditation that you'll be doing. So if you're doing a body scan meditation, most times the expectation is that you'd be lying down. But there's also modifications. So if you have intense pain in your back and you can't lie down, you can make adjustments. So there's not like one steadfast way to be sitting or lying down, but there are some suggestions that might support the practice. So maybe sitting cross-legged on a cushion with your back straight. And the reason that I've found to keep my back straight in practice is because when I sit for long periods of time, if I'm hunched over, it starts to hurt my back. So when my back is straight, it just supports me feeling less pain. So I guess you can say, in that sense, I'm doing it right because it is causing me less pain. And that's my intention, is to not be torturing myself with pain. There's also, from a technique standpoint, in mindfulness-based stress reduction, the actual practice itself in the meditation. So what is happening in your mind and your heart during the practice? And this is also a very big question. And in my class, which I teach, the 8-week class, we will spend 28-30 hours of in-class time and much more time practicing outside of class to try to answer these questions. But what I'm finding over time is I can sort of dilute the practice down to one really essential, or this would be the essence of the practice, the way that I understand it. Most of the practices in mindfulness-based stress reduction follow sort of a two-part sequence. The first part of the sequence is choosing an object of meditation. So that might be, on any given day, the sensation of the breath in the body, or paying attention to the sounds that are around you. Or if you are walking, you can pay attention to your feet touching the ground, or the wind hitting you, and choosing one object, one experience, either internal or external. So when I say internal, I mean the breath or the feelings in the body, or external would be sounds or the feeling of the wind or the feeling of temperature. Choosing one of these things and bringing awareness and attention to it. So that's sort of like part one of the sequence. And part two of the sequence is, if at any point the mind wanders from what you have chosen as your object of meditation, then, and let's say the mind goes somewhere else, away from the breath, if we're choosing the breath, then you simply come back and gently come back to the object that you've chosen. And there's very strong emphasis on non-judgment in this part of the practice, because it's very common that when people lose the object of meditation, so if they've lost focus on the breath, that there will be judgment that comes in, like they've done something wrong. But from a technique standpoint, it's helpful to understand that you haven't done anything wrong if the mind wanders, and that's just what the mind does, and then just gently coming back to the object of meditation. So this two-part sequence of choosing an object, bringing awareness to this object or experience, if the mind wanders, gently coming back without judgment, is really what a lot of mindfulness-based stress reduction can be boiled down to, in my understanding. So that's sort of looking at it from a technique standpoint. Am I doing it right? You can ask yourself the question, am I getting lost in thought for long periods of time and judging myself? And if you find that that is true, then from a technique standpoint, it might be helpful to try to practice this non-judgment. Like, start to tell yourself that you haven't done anything wrong by losing the object or experience of meditation. Also, how do I know if I'm doing it right? In mindfulness-based stress reduction, there's an emphasis on reflecting on the practice itself. So you might say that you are, and I'm putting in quotes, doing it right if you sit in your practice, and then after the practice, the formal sitting practice, you reflect on the practice and start asking yourself questions like, what am I learning from this practice? What is my experience? What is here for me? So I put it in quotes because all of these things it's very subjective, and this is my experience with it, but it might be helpful, and you might find that it starts to feel right for you when you start practicing in this way. Another way that I thought about approaching this question is, how do I know if I'm doing it right? That's the question, right? You could also flip the question. How do I know if I'm doing it wrong? And this might be helpful for some of you. And this is more of an intuitive answer for me. So what I mean is, if the practice is serving you, if you feel as if the practice is serving you, and it's doing more good than harm for you, then how could it be wrong? And that's sort of an intuitive feeling. So if you're practicing some form of meditation and you feel as if it's doing more harm than good, maybe it's causing you physical pain or emotional pain, and it's doing more harm than good. The reason I say that is because in any meditative practice, there's going to be some degree of physical pain from holding postures for long periods of time, and also some degree of emotional pain and negative thought patterns, because that is just in the human experience. So it's just bound to manifest in the practice. And part of the practice is recognizing these things and not being so consumed by them, and not being so perturbed by these experiences of, pain. But there's also a line, at least in my mind, that if it's doing more harm than good, if you find that you're sitting in these practices and it's causing you to have extreme pain in your body and causing you to have really horrible emotional reactions, or if you have like a traumatic history and it's bringing up trauma and it's really re-triggering you, then maybe whatever practice you are doing is causing more harm than good. So really, more importantly than any specific type of meditation or any specific practice within a type of meditation, it is, how is it serving you? Is it serving you? And this kind of goes back to that question of, what is it that you want out of your meditation? So this is, I think at this point we can stop here, and we'll continue with more questions. If you have more questions, please submit them. You can email them to me at james@themindfulplace.net, and I would be happy to answer more questions for you all.